From school, so we just got back, so here we are. I would like to take this time to call to order the ACSD board meeting for Monday.
Recording in progress.
Let me start over. I'd like to call to order the ACSD board meeting for today, Monday, September 23rd at 6:31 p.m. First, I would like us to introduce ourselves, and I'm going to start with Jason.
Jason Jones.
Joanna Doria.
Mary Heather Noble.
Chip Malcolm.
Trisha Allen.
Jamie McCallum.
Wendy Baker.
Barbara Wilson.
Laura Hartman.
Ellen Wheelan-Weiss.
Suzanne Buck.
Steve Orzek.
Brian Bauer.
Ellie Romm.
And on Zoom, we have a couple admin.
Matt Carenti, Director of Finance and Operations.
And Courtney, you can go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
When she gets back.
She might be getting a cup of coffee.
Okay, it's all good, it's all good.
She's been outed.
Next, I would like a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move to adopt the agenda as printed.
I'll second.
Second. If there's no objection, the agenda is approved as warned. Moving on, now is our time for public comments. Public comments are encouraged and welcome at each of our regular board meetings during this particular period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, and citizens will be called on to make their statements by myself. Public comments regarding personnel, students, or legal matters are confidential and will not be heard by the board in public session here. Is there anyone in the audience or on Zoom that would like to make a public comment? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Billard Cox. I live in Ripton, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. I also want to thank you for doing this service that you do for the community. Hard work, it's time consuming, does not pay well. So I really, you have my gratitude. I want to talk about Ripton School and the fact that, to me, over time, I feel like the school is being emptied out. So an example is when Act 46 was passed and consolidation came in. Before that, we had a pre-K program. It was a program, excuse me, that we had supported for many years in Ripton when we had our own school board. So, but very shortly after consolidation, that pre-K program was taken out of the budget. It just disappeared. And then, not too long ago, there was the 6th grade move to Mounds, which I agreed with, thought it was a good idea. But yet, there was another class emptied out of Ripton. And then recently, there's been talk about moving the K-1 class to a different school. Yet again, another emptying out. So it gives me anxiety because what I'm thinking is that if the emptying out continues, it will be a way to close our school because it will be empty. And so I'm here tonight to ask you to place a moratorium on any school closings for the next 2 years. You've done this before, and when that was done, it sort of gave everybody breathing room and allowed everybody to move on to other matters, educational matters, that were very important to deal with. I also would like to ask that you resist moving any other classes out of small schools to other schools for at least a period of 2 years. Thank you very much.
Anyone else care to?
Tammy Johnson, school counselor at Cornwall, Salisbury, and Ripton, but I'm speaking on behalf of Ripton tonight. So thank you to the board members who allowed us all a week to pause to better understand the recent events at Ripton School. I think things are moving in a better direction, but I still felt compelled to speak. As a school and mental health counselor for over 25 years, I've come to understand that change can be difficult for many of us, including children. And since the kindergartner, first and second graders from Ripton can't be here tonight to advocate for themselves, I'm advocating for them and asking you to consider their welfare as you make decisions on their behalf tonight. I've seen these students in their classroom and they're happy and they feel cared for. They have a sense of emotional safety. These students have been learning new skills every day in their multi-grade classroom, and the second graders have been proud to serve as leaders for the younger students. I want you to consider that whatever changes you might make tonight as a board will impact them for the rest of their lives. The kindergarten, first, and second graders want to stay at Ripton School, and their parents want them to stay there. If you think at any time that any of the students at the school in general need to transition to another ACSD school, I ask you that you do that in a planned and thoughtful manner so that their parents and the school professionals can support them in this transition and help them feel that this change is in their best interest. The removal of children from a school where they have spent the last month, or in some cases a year and 1 month, coming together as a community, I don't think is in their best interest. A Ripton third grader, after hearing from his parents about the possible changes for the kindergarten students at Ripton School being proposed by this board, wisely asked, why would they move them someplace else now when they just got used to being here? And I would not know how to answer that question honestly if it was asked of me. Lastly, I'd like to remind the board about something I mentioned last Monday. Every year for the past 6 years that I've worked at Ripton School, there has been at least one student who has come to that school after struggling emotionally, behaviorally, and academically in a different public school or at a specialized therapeutic school that was out of the district. All of these students have been successful at Ripton School. And not only has these helped the students to feel a sense of belonging and to positively impact the trajectory of their lives, it has also saved our district a lot of money. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Go ahead.
Michelle Fay, Ripton. I'm here tonight to voice my concerns about the present situation at the Ripton Elementary School, which includes the resignation of an elementary teacher and principal. As a Ripton resident and retired elementary educator, I have strong feelings for the survival of our very special community school. Coming from a background of teaching in several schools within the district and within the county, including a school with a combined grade K-1-2 classroom, I have faith that all the children at Ripton Elementary are receiving a unique and rich education. I've recently subbed in several different ACSD schools, including Ripton, and have witnessed strong learning and enrichment opportunities for all students, provided by dedicated educators. I'm also aware that since the district recently chose to transfer some students from Mary Hogan to Ripton Elementary, this is an indication that there is a recognition by the district of the positive attributes that Ripton Elementary offers. I am asking the ACSD school board to place a moratorium on closing any schools within the district for a time period of at least 2 years. In Ripton, we have already lost our enrollment of preschool age children when the district decided to do away with the preschool, and then lost our 6th graders due to district reconfiguration. Small schools need time and space to ensure that their children can continue to learn and grow in their own communities with the support of those community members who value their local schools so greatly. Please consider putting a 2-year hold on closing schools in the district in order to give schools the time and space that they need and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go over to those online, and then I'll come back in case someone wants to speak in the room. Could you read the name, Jason?
Sierra Thornton. Go ahead,
Thank
Sierra.
you. Go ahead. Sierra? Can you hear us? We can't hear you. We cannot hear you if you're speaking. Okay. If there is someone else in the room that would like to speak, go ahead, and then,
Liam Batches, Greenwood, special educator primarily at Ripton, but also this year, one day at Mary Hogan to help out there. I love that this year we began by a focus on we all belong. That's a beautiful sentiment, but hard work. I really thank the teachers, administrators, new superintendent for doing some of that work when we were in conflict within our community. We leaned into trying to make sure every voice was heard and different people were acknowledged. I would love to see us continue to lean into that work in a way that builds trust and also builds creativity. I have bounced around in life, and most recently been bounced around here in ACSD. 6 years, 6 different principals. At MUMS, 3 years, principals on a kind of a revolving door. Then Shoreham, said goodbye to that principal just at the end of the school year. At Ripton, I'm like, can I please just have some stability? Just a place to belong, just a little stability. And boom, this happens. How can we do the work of helping people feel like they belong, helping children feel like they belong, when staff, members of the community, are barely feeling like they belong? Only through stability, only through careful listening, and creative ways of building on individual strengths, the strengths of different communities, the strengths of small or big schools. Mary Hogan is not one size fits all. It's a great place for many kids, but some kids would benefit from a smaller setting. We're Vermonters. We like small towns and little tiny towns that was that a town that we just went through? Yeah, oh yeah, that was a town. That we're Vermonters. Why wouldn't we want that for our children too? A small sense of community. So let's continue to lean into we all belong. But we all belong in ways that Vermonters belong, in their own way.
thank you. Okay, Sierra, we're gonna move you over again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can.
Awesome. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you for taking the time for listening and to let us speak out about our opinions. I am Sierra Thornton, and I am in my 4th year of teaching PE at Ripton. I'm also located at 2 other elementary schools in the district. I'm not a person that really enjoys speaking about my opinions, but I feel this topic surrounding Ripton is one that would benefit by hearing from different perspectives. During my first year of teaching, I was part-time physical educator at 2 schools and part-time para at Ripton. Immediately entering Ripton, I could feel the support from the staff and had the chance to witness firsthand lead teachers instructing and educating students. Ripton emulates a feeling of home and comfort. I'm only there 2 days a week now that I'm a full-time physical educator, but I can still feel that warmth and unity. I can only imagine how immense the unity must feel to the students when they get to be present all 5 days of the week. I've seen students in all classrooms go from shy and in their shell to building confidence and making connections with others, which aided them in letting their personality shine through. I especially see this in the K2 class when I get to see them on their PE days. Ripton has a way of connecting with their students and making them feel like a family. It would be a real disservice to the ACSD community to remove K1 from Ripton. I strongly believe students who need additional support, whether it is academic support or emotional support, Ripton uses all the resources available, including staff members that step in when needed and work together to support the students. It truly does take a village. I can honestly say the environment in the classroom, specifically K-2 classroom this year, has been nothing but welcoming and supportive of student learning. Speaking specifically from my point of view being their PE teacher, the K-2 class works incredibly well. Second graders have opportunities to advance their skills during our activities and share their learning with the younger students. This gives the second graders an opportunity to be the leader in their class and build confidence and responsibility. This also allows K1 to have good role models to look up to and encourages them to try new skills and understand that learning new skills can be hard. K1 has the opportunity to observe their classmates and practice skills and know what to do when they feel frustrated by looking up to the second graders. I feel as though this combination works well specific to Ripton because of the class size. There's no student left behind. Listening to the options that stand before us, I see that everyone wants what's best for the students. What's best for the students is where we disagree. Keeping these students in an environment where they're already comfortable and welcomed, I believe is the best option, especially when we have the resources and staff to support this combination for students for this school year. If the board agrees K1-2 combination isn't working, I really hope we can find another solution that supports keeping our students at Ripton and keeping our family together. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone, okay, go ahead.
I want to pick up on a comment that Brian made 2 weeks ago because I think it needs to be there. The ACSD should change its policy.
Can you
Do you mind just stating
Oh.
your name for the
Okay, can I come up?
record?
Can I?
Just say your name.
Just say your name and your,
McLaughlin, yeah, Middlebury.
thanks, Hugh.
I believe that the ACSD should change its policy for providing in-school preschool to a more equitable, and we're facing current funding challenges for next year. So the current practice is of 25 slots in preschool program at Mary Hogan and 15 at Bridport for residents of hosting towns is an anachronism. I agree with Brian that the limitation of this benefits to children residing in those host towns should be eliminated from ACSD policies. For your information, in fiscal 2023, which is the latest data on the Agency of Education dashboard, there were additional 129 children receiving preschool subsidies for care not in the two public elementary schools. So there are parents who work and need coverage more than the in-school programs. One of my plumbers is a person like that. So I want to point out that we are providing more than just those 40 slots. However, just increasing the in-school pre-K demand by allowing more people from other towns without increasing supply, in my view, is a hollow gesture. 2 years ago, the Bridport principal at a board meeting told me that there was an unmet need in Shoreham and Bridport that was double the current 15 slots for families out there who could take advantage of the in-school operation. So my recommendation is that in next year's budget, a pre-K teacher be hired for a second classroom west of Otter Creek. So that there, and I defer to the ACSD staff to choose the location. My sense from 2-year-old socioeconomic data, again from the Agency of Education, is that Shoreham would be a great location if we can identify a pre-K classroom serving up to 15 students. If Shoreham is unable to identify a suitable classroom, then a second classroom at Bridport would have the shortest commute times for parents along the 22A corridor. So I believe this is low-hanging fruit, and I think it would show that the board members are focused on representing the interests of all students, all children rather, in the ACSD district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Whoops, sorry. I'll let you be the timer.
There's
Go
a
ahead.
hand back there.
Yep, Steve?
Steve Cash from Ripton. Just
just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being here. I know some of you are parents and obviously have other things to do, so thank you for your service. I'm kind of going to break mine into two. Just want to provide an update on, some of what I've seen going on in Ripton in the past week since I was last here. So first off, there was a meeting between teachers, staff, and parents in the K2 classroom that I believe was organized by a teacher. With less than about 16 hours of notice, parents who represented just over 85% of the students in that classroom showed up for the 8 a.m. meeting. So there was a really good turnout. During that meeting, there was a productive dialogue of both sides, staff, teachers, parents, and I think everybody left that meeting in general in a better space. It was a very productive opportunity. When my son goes to second grade tomorrow in that classroom, I do not think there's an emergency in his classroom. It's not my decision to make, that's my perspective. I don't think there's a need to remove kids from that classroom. Certainly there's more repair work to be done. Can't have a couple of meetings and make things go away that were pretty hurtful. So there's more work to be done. That's my perspective on that. If you step 1 minute, 19 seconds. The second part of my comment is that the superintendent, when he reached out to me to start to establish a community dialogue with Ripton. And that was a really positive gesture. I think one thing that I've heard throughout everything I've done with Ripton School is, it hasn't been future facing. And it was refreshing because this was a conversation of, there are challenges on the, horizon. Certainly, everyone knows what they are in education. What can Ripton do? How can Ripton be a part of the district? What can the community bring to the table to be a part of it? The details and actions that are going to follow that meeting, I don't know what they are exactly, but I'm hopeful it can be a good foundation. And it was really interesting at that meeting. There was 2 of us who were on the Ripton School Board when we were through, and then there was 4 current and past educators. We probably had over 100 years of educational experience there. It was pretty impressive. But one of the people there said that, it's been challenging throughout these conversations because every time we talk about the future of Ripton, it's about what's going to get taken away. And I don't remember, somebody else said something about taking stuff away. And I hope that the dialogue we had the other day can serve as a foundation to approach some of the challenges going forward in a different way. So it's 2 minutes 47. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for timing. Anyone else in the room or on Zoom that would like to make a public comment? Go ahead.
Hi, Mary Slozar. I'm going to start my timer. One thing, I was not here last week, but I was able to watch the meeting, as riveting as it was online. And one thing that there was a lot of talk about a crisis and an emergency. And one thing that I feel compelled to share from my perspective as a parent and community member is that the reason for that crisis and emergency is not that there was a 1-2-3 classroom, or a K-1-2 classroom. That was not the reason. The reason was because there was no partnership with the community. There was very poor communication between leadership and parents, and that led to a breakdown in trust and collaboration, which all of our schools depend on, no matter the size. And part of what has led to things working out or seeming to work out at Ripton is a lot of people digging deep and doing the repair work and doing that communication. And I just hope that that is a lesson for all of us in this experiment of educating our children. I also want to just acknowledge that I know it was tough and controversial for this board to make the decision to wait on any action last week, but I think it was the right call. I was really floored that people were so quick to want to take action that would have devastated a school, so many children, so many families, and probably for the future, without having full information really about what was going on with staff who may have been resigning or not, and all kinds of things. So I hope that that kind of pause can happen in the future, and I want to applaud you all for taking that risk. I also want to, I feel like it's important to call it, I'm at 1:50 if anybody's wondering. that this conversation, the action, and the types of things that were being proposed last week are not happening in a vacuum. Onlookers of what this school board is up to and the administrators and discussions that are happening, you know, we've heard the mention of other strategies in other school districts that empty schools before closing them. All these things have been said. And the proposals that have been put out there are all in line with those other things that have been brought up in other contexts. And I raise that because it's important that we not, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a lot of trust and a lot of respect for your observers to pretend like a lot of this is all just in one little isolated event, because there really are connections and it makes sense. But have enough respect for your community members to have that conversation in a very explicit and honest way. I'll leave it there. I'll leave my rest for my later public.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom or in the room who would like to make a public comment? Oh, we do have one.
Yes, Ms.
John Wetzel.
John Wetzel. Okay. John, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. Hi. John Wetzel from Ripon as well. I was there last week as well. I just want to say, yeah, thank you to not rushing into, in my opinion, rushing into making a decision without knowing, you know, enough, just a quick decision without knowing necessarily all the details. And I really hope that the details and the current status of where we're at are you know, looked at before anything is voted on, making any, you know, major extreme change to the Ripon school as far as moving K-1-2 or moving any grades in that matter. And you know, I support all of what has been said by other Ripon residents, and I think it's important to note that it's not just Ripon residents speaking or parents speaking, but also people who are there every day with the students who are saying how good this is. And this is not a failing school. This school is functioning and it's working and it's going through hardships at times and changes at times, but that it has the support behind it of the people who are there every day and the people who are around it every day. And I think that that's important to success in anything. And just a quick note, like anytime any decisions are rushed, that's when mistakes are made. And that's when, that's a common thing, you know, like, oh, you must do this now. It's what car salesmen do. Nothing against if there's any car salesmen in the room, but they don't want you to leave. They want you to make a decision right away. And it's important to know, to take the time and to consider consequences for actions, maybe beyond, you know, what you think. So that's all I ask to continue with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room or on Zoom? Go ahead.
Samantha Eisenberger Ripton. I just actually want to make one comment because not many have been made in regard to Meg Chestnut, Miss C. My experience of her, witnessing her, was she was incredibly gifted working with the kids. And so I just want to offer gratitude for her and her showing up at Ripton as she did, what she offered our children. I'm just very grateful. I still don't really know what all happened and why we're in this situation, but I just wanted to offer that. She has a true gift with children, and even though she might have more challenges communicating with adults, we have her there to work with our kids, and it has been amazing. So I just want to thank her for that.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room or on Zoom? Go ahead.
Chris Gilbo, I'm also Ripton. I'm a parent of a second grader there. My wife and I recently moved to Ripton last summer, and she followed the Ripton Elementary online for a year before we came here. Our child was very apprehensive about being at school. We came from Austin, Texas. He had a really hard time there. Would cry every day we dropped him off, didn't want to go, would they had uniforms. One day he cut his uniform thinking that would keep him from needing to go. Now that he's at Ripton, he runs to school every day. He loves it there. He feels included, he feels accepted, he has friends. For a parent, it's just pulls at your heartstrings to see that happen and to know that that can be possible for your son. A lot of that has to do with the faculty and the staff and people helping him to connect, as well as the other parents there that just have such a tight community and that value. And all I wanted to say was that I believe there was lots of apprehension from the meeting last week that, oh, if we leave things the way they are with the K1 and 2 classroom, that we'll be right back in this meeting in a few weeks trying to figure things out. And I wanted to say, as someone who watched the meeting last week, who was at the meeting this week with the teachers and everything, that I felt there was an overwhelming sense of unity among the parents, that we were behind this idea of keeping people where they're at and to sticking it out and working together to make this thing happen. And so I just wanted to give a parent's perspective, and from someone who's kind of been in the mix and everything, to maybe put some of those fears at ease, that I think there is a lot of unity, I think, right now with going forward, keeping people where they're at and keeping forward with the way things are. So that's all.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone on Zoom, please raise your hand, or in the room. Okay, I'm pausing here. I don't see any, so I think I'm assuming there's no more. So I just want to take this moment to thank everyone for coming out this evening and giving us public comments and feedback. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much. And so what I'd like to do is move on to the next agenda item, which is a recommendation to approve the minutes of 9/16. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any comments?
I'll just, Brian emailed me today just about something he wanted to raise in the minutes. There was something, and I'll just bring it up because he called it to my attention. There was something I mentioned last time in relation to the discussion around conflict of interest policy that was not recorded in the minutes, having to do with the conflict of interest policy being primarily dedicated around financial or economic stuff. And he called to my attention that he thought that was, I don't know, what do you want to say, Brian?
It should have been included.
Should have been included. So I'll just bring that up. Thanks for calling it to my attention, Brian, and that's it.
Mary Heather?
Just in response to that, that was not the policy that was cited.
Yeah,
The conflict of interest policy was not the policy that was cited.
Right,
It was A5.
The A5, which
Code of
is
conduct.
Code of Conduct. Yeah.
I heard Barb say conflict of interest before you mentioned A5.
Absolutely.
I thought we were talking about last
Yeah, I
time.
misspoke. I meant to say.
The policy I read from was A5.
Yeah, I meant to
Code of
say it's
conduct.
Code of Conduct.
Got it.
Any other corrections? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions?
I'll abstain, Mary Heather.
Okay.
Okay. Next is approving the ACSD bills. I'm going to turn it over to Chip.
There are none.
There are none. Is this a first?
Well, we just met last week.
I know. But still, I think it's a first.
There are always bills.
I know. Moving forward then, we have the report of our student representatives, so I'll let you guys share what you'd like to.
Okay, so for like school engagement, this week is Spirit Week, Homecoming Week. Our homecoming theme is Wizard of Oz. So we have Spirit Days every day this week, which is just like dress up days. So today was Green and Bling, which is something to do with Wizard of Oz. Is, Twister Tuesday, I think, which is like wacky. So anyway, and it's really fun because it just brings the school community together, and I think it introduces the freshmen to our little homecoming tradition and stuff. So our football game is on Friday and our dance is on Saturday. So that'll be really great. And then the clubs they seem to be pretty much back in motion. SCORE has regular meetings now on Fridays, and I know that Model UN, I think they meet on Mondays or Tuesdays. So
Excellent. Go ahead.
I'm going to start with some positives.
Okay.
So today we had our senior class photo. We made like a little 25 out of people on the football field, and that was really fun and interesting. It took a long time. So along with NAVA and clubs, MUH's Hope Happens Here, which I happen to be on the board of, we met today, and we used to use these little, if you don't know what Hope Happens Here, it's a mental health awareness club. So we used to use these little cards that people would pick up, but they didn't really pick it up, so we're transitioning out of those and making a website. So be on the lookout for our website in the next couple weeks, because we're going to be using that instead. And Bread Loaf Day. So we did Bread Loaf Day, which is what the peer leaders do for the 9th graders when they're transitioning into high school. We take them out for the day out of school, which they love. And we take them to any sort of site. For my year, they took us to, I think it's Common Ground. And we do a bunch of team building activities, and it's catered, and it's tradition for peer leaders to make desserts for the 9th graders when they're made. Yeah, so that was really fun, and that happened. But okay, there's one thing. I've heard like some things just from like friends or teachers that they really want AC in the building, and I know that's been a thing for like ever. So, there's just like that, but yeah, that's it.
it gets very hot sometimes in places and very cold.
Particularly in the 3rd floor, like apparently people get like headaches, and that can just like.
When the commons are cold.
The basement too.
Yeah.
It's just like weird heat and cold levels. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Does any of the board members have any questions for our student reps? Well, thank you so much for reporting out. That's important information, so we're definitely listening. Next, we have scheduled a two-purpose executive session. One is personnel related, and the other one is labor negotiations related. The first one is per VSA, 1 VSA 313A3, and the latter, the negotiations, is per 1 VSA 313A1. And since all the board members are here, we don't have to do a link to bring anyone on. So what I'm going to have to ask is during this period of time, that the public needs to leave the room, the Zooming, the MCTV needs to stop, and once we exit, and Mr. Flowers, of course, as well. And then
Online.
Yeah, and online. So we will. Yes.
If I'm going to cast the documents for the exec session, then we would need a.
Okay, so we will need to bring you in. Okay, so Jason's going to help me with that. So we will. Turn down the Zoom temporarily and then come back to the Zoom link. So I just wanted to let folks know that. And then I need a motion for us to go into executive session.
We'll also need to stop recording.
And yes, that's what I said.
I'd like to move that we go into executive session for personnel-related issues per Personnel 1, VSA 313A3, and labor negotiations per 1, VSA 313A1.
Second. Okay, all those in favor?
Can
Yeah.
we discuss something?
Yeah.
Folks who are on Zoom, they will reconnect to the same Zoom meeting, correct?
I believe so. They may have to go into the link again if we actually shut it down, but it will be the same link. Yeah.
Yes, we should shut it down.
So if we, yeah,
You have to, I think.
you'll need to
Start-
create a new one for Matt.
Got
For
that.
Matt
Yeah.
only, but, and which can be a meeting.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a
I'll
webinar.
come back out whenever we're done.
Well, I was just gonna ask, do you have an approximate time to tell people?
We've identified on the agenda about 20 minutes.
Somebody will come and get you.
I told them I'd come in, I don't think after
For
we
the
get them.
Zoom, for people
So
on
folks,
Zoom.
this is a thing going around, make sure you.
Okay, I think, I know Ellen had to step away, but I think we need to continue. So next on the agenda is action on support staff master agreement. Steve, I'm gonna turn that over to you.
If you have not seen the tentative agreement, this is the finalized version of it. You should, if you have been reading and keeping up to date. There are just some very small wordsmithing things in here that kind of clarified some things. So there is no major change. There was no additional negotiation. We just hammered out some language. The support staff approved and ratified the agreement last Wednesday, and therefore it's I don't want to say that we can't reject it. We have, by signing it, already accepted it. But it needs to come before the full board, and that's why we have a vote on this today. So, but the time for questions and the time for saying, can we change this, that's well over. This is just, again, information to pass on to you so that you know what the board is agreeing to.
You want to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion that we accept the document that you have in front of you, which is the agreement between the Addison Central School District and the Addison Central School Educators Association Support Staff Unit.
I'll second that.
Accepted.
Okay. It's been, a motion has been seconded. Any discussion? Okay.
The one thing that I would like to say is, between the teachers and this was the harder agreement to come to, and thank you so much to Matt Carenti, Chris Leopold, the negotiating team on the other side. I mean, everybody put in honest, long hours trying to come to this agreement. Yeah, thank you to Jamie, thank you to Suzanne, my co-members on the team, and again, Matt, Tim was heavily involved in this. Various people were really important putting this together, and I really do appreciate the support that I got to try to get this to come together. So.
Okay, thank you.
Good job.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we'll make an official vote instead of me saying the unanimous consent. So all those in favor of approving the staff master agreement indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It has, okay. Thank you,
As
Laura.
always.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been approved. Chris Pratt is in, and he wanted a second to just say a few words.
Yeah, I would like to thank the board for voting this contract, but also the negotiating team. I would like to give maybe a little history. I don't know if I have 3 minutes or not, but so this contract is an excellent contract. I'm very proud of the work that we did. It kind of goes back for a number of years when we became a united district. When we became a district, it was evident that there was an inequity between the outlying schools and those in Middlebury, with the teachers as well as the support staff. The teachers was taken care of pretty quickly. It's taken, how many years have we been a district now? 8 years?
Yeah.
Is it 8 years? So that saddened me that it took that long to remedy this issue, but with this particular negotiating team, when they looked at it, they fixed it. I think the board's had a lot of training on equity, as well as the administrators. I know I've sent emails to various people, maybe on this board, about equity. So I'm hopeful that this contract kind of puts that to sleep, so to speak. I know in this year alone, in talking with Dr. Baker, she used the term professional staff. I told her how support staff felt about that, and in one conversation, she changed it throughout our whole school district. So I'm very hopeful that that kind of work will continue. I know even in the interview committee that Dr. Baker, the board had, they invited 10 support staff, and they also invited 10 teachers. So I'm actually just here to say thank you. We need to continue to work on that. A couple things that are really important for this contract is the retirement that we had in our district. We had a 403B, which when we became a United District, I'm not sure if I'm using the right term, United District, there was only a 2% match. So if you think about the math, a paraprofessional making $20,000, a 2% match from the board is 4%, adds up to like $16,000 over 20 years. So this particular, they accepted VEMRs, which is it's a great thing for our support staff. They accepted Plan A. I was shooting for Plan B, so there's work to be done there in 2 years. But I just...
You said you were retiring one.
Yeah, I know. But anyhow, there's work to do, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction to include all of our members in our school district. And even something that Dr. Baker, she didn't pay me to be here, by the way.
Oh.
But Dr. Baker, our opening day of school, or when staff came back, she invited every staff member. And I know the cooking staff wasn't there, but she went to the director and said, next year I want you there. So that type of leadership is something that we need, and I would love to come back here yearly and give you an update to see if she's continuing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Next is report of the superintendent. So I'm going to turn it over to you. First, it's the appointments.
Yep, we have some appointments. Typically, you like to read them out loud, so I'll give a minute for that to happen.
Yeah. Suzanne, do you want to do the honors?
Sure. I'll move to the board to accept the appointment of Lindsay Audette, paraprofessional 1.0, appoint Brianna Blackwell, paraprofessional 1.0, appoint Justin Myers, paraprofessional 1.0 for the FY 24-25 school year.
Jason seconded it. And any discussion? If there's no objection, then I will indicate that the appointments are approved. Okay.
So with your permission, maybe given the public engagement tonight, we could move the continuation of the Ripton K through 2 grade configuration update up, and then we have a couple presentations from Matt, just in case not everyone's interested in learning about the tax formula and equivalence calculations and whatnot, although they are riveting.
Yes.
I'm pleased to report, as some have indicated, that we're in a different place tonight than we were previously. There has been nothing short of heroic effort on the part of the community of Ripton and of the staff at Ripton to find ways to come together to put to rest the issues that brought the circumstances before you when we really had reached an unworkable point when we were together on September 9th. So since that time, the K-12 parents have met with Melissa Giroux and they have had enough conversation about how best to move forward that she feels comfortable staying. So, so that's a significant improvement, and I think, you know, the routines of the classroom feel comfortable that they will be moving forward without interruption from this point forward. We will continue to monitor that situation and just make sure that it continues as everyone expects, but that feels good. As Steve mentioned, I was able to meet with some community members in Ripton who you know, understand that you know, we've got to kind of do some thinking out of the box here as to how to move forward. You know, there are scheduled to be maybe even 28 kids in Ripton next year, unless circumstances change in some way. And we have some conversations. The policy committee has already begun. I'm interested to know the work that the Ripton community has done in terms of thinking about ways, you know, that we could bring the school forward, perhaps differently as we move forward. I don't know what the results of those communications will be, but I think we've established a dialogue and a way to begin to engage in these conversations. You know, given that it's important to do so. I think everybody agrees it's important to do so. So that feels good. I think the community as a whole has taken this situation very seriously and has appropriately come together. I've met with the staff a couple of times, and I'll be meeting with parents and probably staff tomorrow night as well, just to kind of close the loop and make sure that everybody feels good about moving forward in roles and responsibilities. You know, as we continue. We have a team that is providing administrative support to the building right now as we kind of assess what are the needs and how are we moving forward with that, and that feels like something that we will be able to do for, you know, a few weeks perhaps, and then we'll have a sense as to where we're going. The principal's position has been advertised at a 0.5, which is comparable to Weybridge's position right now. So we'll see what that yields, and I undoubtedly will have a report for you at the next board meeting if need be. But it feels like at this point there is no action for your consideration.
Okay, any questions?
Do we have to formally take?
Yes. I did some homework on that today, trying to figure out. If folks may recall, at the last meeting, we did a motion to postpone the action that we had proposed at the last board meeting. And from what I have discovered in doing some research, and I actually reached out to someone I know that is well versed in Robert's rules, because Robert's rules really didn't address per se what do you do when it's a moot point, right? Mm-hmm. When you no longer need to take the action. And so I think really just putting it in the record that at this point, you know, that we don't have to bring this motion back, that because the circumstances are mute, that required us to take that action or consider that action. And so if no one objects to that, that's how I would like to handle it.
That's reasonable.
It's basically just staying tabled.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, you can do with motions.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank the board very much for your willingness to ensure that you know, a situation that was presenting itself as quite unworkable was sort of brought to the surface and handled well, and I appreciate the type of dialogue that you had at the last meeting in a tough conversation. You know, it was my superintendent colleagues, you know, around the state that have watched the meeting. You know, we're certainly not the only district that has, you know, circumstances that are you know, where you know, we have schools with a challenge from here, you know, and there, and I think they, you know, they really appreciated the way in which you worked through those pieces at the last meeting. You know, your use of Robert's rules, your support of each other, and going through difficult conversations and making sure that that was all done well and done in open session as it should be. And that I appreciate your setting that example for our students of strong civil public discourse about difficult things. That's you're to be commended for that, in my opinion, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mary Heather.
Yeah, similarly, I think kudos need to be given to the folks in the community for coming together with the staff, and Dr. Baker for you fostering that connection, and really, kind of cultivating that conversation, and while also protecting the professionalism of our staff, and I think reminding all of us of the lanes we need to stay in and the mutual respect we need to have for those lanes. That's what we're going to need to continue to acknowledge moving forward, and there will be additional difficult conversations moving forward, because we can't let this happen again. We can't let this happen again in the spring, when it comes time to populate our schools again. So I'm hoping and trusting the policy committee to come together and come up with creative ideas for us all to discuss, and we can do this. If any board is going to do this, it's this board, truly. So
Thank you, Mary Heather.
yeah.
Go ahead, Ellen.
I'm not sure. Is there a way to actually get rid of the motion so that it's not just perpetually on the table? Like, I don't like the idea that it's just sitting there and we wouldn't have to go through this whole process again if it came up. We'd just have to vote on it. Like, I'd rather make it disappear permanently, so we'd have to start over.
Is there like a motion to repeal the motion?
You can take up a matter that was previously tabled.
But that requires a motion to take up.
Yeah,
Right.
you have to
So-
take it up.
Right.
And then.
Yeah, which we don't want to take up. And
Don't we withdraw motions?
you can withdraw a motion. I mean, the board would have to withdraw that motion.
I mean, that's, I think, what Ellie's asking. Like, we can just ignore the motion forever, which is one way, or if we're gonna withdraw it, or if we're gonna ignore it forever, we might as well withdraw it. I think that's the point Ellie's making. I don't, again, know the machinations of Robert Rules great, but I think that's what we've done in the past.
Right.
I mean, I am happy to withdraw this motion if that brings some comfort to folks, recognizing
It's at
that
the board
it's just
level.
as easy for.
It's at the board levels, so, the board needs to actually vote to withdraw it. I was, because it's mute at this point.
Right.
It basically does table it, and if we had a situation in the future and required some other kind of action, it would have to be a new motion. But if we want to formally, basically say that this motion is withdrawn, I can entertain a motion for that, and we'll vote on it. Do you want to do that, Ellie?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I move that we formally withdraw the motion that Mary Heather placed last week around closure of the
I'll second that.
moving the K1 classroom.
Okay, and Brian seconded. Any discussion? Great. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Any abstention? Okay, so the ayes have it.
Or can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Mary Heather, I totally agree with you, and I just really appreciate that. I think last week it felt like waiting a week was kicking a can, and I really appreciate Wendy and the community not delaying discussions or acting like the work would just stop, and really leaning into what you were saying earlier, sir, leaning into the process of collaboratively and creatively working together. So thank you, everyone who's been part of that. We're really grateful. I'm really grateful, to speak for myself.
Thank you. Any other feedback? Okay. Great, thank you.
So moving on to other things in the superintendent's report. I'm assuming Matt Carente is still with us. And
I'm here.
there we go.
I've been trying to figure out when I can get some food here, I tell you.
Oh, no.
So.
Me
so-
too, Matt, yeah.
Who wants what?
So,
Oh.
Matt has two things to share with you, and both of them are meant to be educational at this standpoint. They're the beginnings of just being able to highlight some things that are happening in the district financially. And so the first one is something that is already in place as it relates to our use of federal funds that helps the district to determine something that we're calling equivalence. Ways that that schools within our district are staffed in a similar pattern. We are not required to exercise this formula with all of our schools, as I understand it, because we have schools that are under 100 students. So obviously that throws numbers off when you're talking about students to staff ratios. It can sometimes tremendously. So we're not required to do that. We are a district that does that though internally, and so as we're moving into the world of equity-based budgeting, which is where the team is right now, I just wanted to highlight for you a way in which we already have a methodology that we report that gets at a little bit of this. This relates to policy D4, which is Title I comparability. And it is a policy that could be revised, should the board choose to do that, to include other things. It doesn't only have to be there just for the federal formula. So Matt has a nifty chart that he's going to walk you through, that he may even choose to make interactive this evening, just as a way of helping you understand ways that this kind of material is already in place.
Got a lot to cover tonight, so we might get to interactive at a different time. But,
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen so that hopefully everybody can see it, and it'll be part of the recorded session here.
And it's all right if you understand a portion of this now. These things can cycle back. It's just ways for us to begin to build a language and some understanding about some of these pieces.
Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Can't
So,
read it, I can see it.
And thank you, Dr. Baker. As Wendy just said, I have two presentations to share with you. This is the short one, so we're going to go through the staffing equivalents and talk through some of these terms. It's important to look at equivalence because it's one of the ways that the federal government forces us, for the sake of being eligible or ineligible for title grant funds, to compare our schools. And they have a set of rules and tests that they make us put our schools through to show all different measures of equivalence. And we're going to talk about two of them tonight. One is comparability, the other one is supplement, not supplant. So just to start us off, Board Policy D4 says the district shall use local and state funds to ensure equivalence among schools in staffing and the provision of curricular materials and instructional supplies. Students in all schools shall be eligible for comparable programs and supplemental supports. So before we go into the chart that I made, and we'll go into each one of the two charts, one for neutral methodology, which is part of supplement, supplant, and one for comparability. We're going to look at each one of those separately, but let's just look at some of the definitions first. So equivalence, we've defined here as a measure of resource distribution based on enrollment. So this is another way of saying we've taken need out of the equation for the sake of equivalence, and we're really just measuring resources based on how many kids are in each school. Comparability is defined as how do schools with higher poverty rates compare to schools with lower poverty rates. Neutral methodology is how does ACSD calculate baseline resource distribution? What is our method for determining the baseline so that we can then calculate if resources are supplemental or supplanting. And so when title grant resources, in this case, replace district resources, for instance, we don't fund an interventionist at a school because we use title grant funds to fund that. Well, if that is a district with a high poverty rate, that would be a supplanting, where we're using federal money to pay for something that we would normally pay for out of the general fund. What the purpose of the title funds are to be supplemental. So we have to show a baseline where we have equivalence across all of our schools. That doesn't mean equal, but it means a neutral methodology that we use to show that the resource distribution is all supplemental in the case of a title fund school. Instructional staff, we're going to see this ratio of students to instructional staff, and I thought it was important to point out that in this case, instructional staff is principal, classroom teachers, itinerant or specials teachers. So this would be at Mary Hogan, just the FTE, 1.0 FTEs of music, art, phys ed, and foreign language. And then itinerant is just another word for teachers who work at multiple schools in the rural or the smaller elementary schools. For some reason, paras are only counted as 50% of their FTE in the instructional staff calculation, and so that's what that 50% there is.
And those are only general ed paras.
Those are general ed paras. So so we're going to go to our comparability chart, which is the first of the two. Again, this is one of the fiscal tests that we have to pass in order to qualify for Title I funding. So the rule says, the comparability rule says, title schools with greater than 100 enrollment must stay within 10% of the district average ratio for non-title schools. So again, a title school is a school with a high and eligible rate of students living in poverty. And the comparability is just asking the question, are we providing resources to our schools that are title eligible at the same rate or within 10% margin of error to our non-title schools? So we have here all the schools, all the elementary schools, and you can see I ran it two ways for Mary Hogan because it is the only one that meets the greater than 100 enrollment, and so it's the only one where we could hypothetically be asked to show comparability. You can see here that I ran it with 100% paras and with 50% just to show that if we counted 100% of our para FTE, we would meet comparability, but that when we drop it to 50% para FTE, we do not. And just to back up for a second, what we're comparing those numbers of students to instructional staff, those are the numbers there. What we're comparing those to is the non-title average at the bottom. So 7.9, you can see there at the bottom, we take 110% of that to create the thresholds. So any student to instructional staff ratio higher than 8.7 would not meet comparability. However, the main caveat for us here is that you can't compare two schools that are on either side of the 100 enrollment threshold. So you can't compare a 100 plus school to a smaller than 100 school because they're apples and oranges in the eyes of the federal government. So none of our schools within ACSD, none of our elementary schools are forced to show comparability. As Dr. Baker said, we are looking at it for the sake of kind of our own data and showing what the ratios would be if we were, for instance, to have to show comparability between Cornwall, which is our second largest elementary school with an enrollment that hovers right around 100. If Cornwall passed 100 in enrollment, we would have to show comparability between Mary Hogan, which is a title eligible school, and the average, or in this case, the only non-title school, which would be Cornwall. Okay. Any questions on comparability before we move on to the next slide? Remember, this is the short presentation. Okay, I'm gonna go on.
Wait,
You have
wait,
questions?
we have questions, Matt,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry, I can't see you. I can't see anybody.
I'm sorry, Laura?
These numbers are calculated using current staffing and student numbers, not necessarily open positions,
Current budgeted staffing.
budgeted staffing, so
Yes.
not.
open positions.
It does.
It does include open
So
positions.
it doesn't reflect whether the positions are filled or not. You know, those are budgeted positions, and it also doesn't suggest whether or not, you know, one school or another has enough staffing to get their job done. This is just how are they in relation to each other, you know, so.
Thank you.
Steve?
I had a question about that first line where you said Mary Hogan Title I enrollment greater than 100 with paras at 100% FTE. Is that just what we do? Because you said that's not relevant to the federal government. So I'm kind of wondering why that line is there.
Yeah, I included it just to show that
What a difference.
the para FTE was in this calculation enough of a mathematical change to move us outside of the comparability window. And that one of the main reasons that we're not asked to show comparability between a larger school like Mary Hogan and a smaller school is because of things like the para ratio, which paras scale relative to enrollment in a way that does not make them mathematically equivalent. For instance, you know, if you were to calculate the administrator to student ratio alone in a small school and then extend that to a school the size of Mary Hogan, you would need to hire something like 9.5 assistant principals. And there are not 9.5 assistant principals at Mary Hogan because there's a higher rate of paraeducators. So that's one of the reasons that that the calculation doesn't stack up between a larger school and a smaller school. Okay. The next, I do 2 slides. The next 2 slides, we're going to look at supplementing and not supplanting by showing our neutral methodology that we use to determine whether a school in an instructional staff to student ratio falls within the acceptable variance, above the acceptable variance, or below the acceptable variance. And so I'm going to start from the top. Acceptable variance is first we start by calculating the target, and we calculate the target by taking the average of all student to instructional staff numbers for each school. So you can see on the top right, 7.2 is our district average. We then take 15% above and 15% below that average. You can see high and low there. And that creates a variance window, which we're looking to stay in. Another way of putting it is we find the middle and we try to keep everybody as close to the middle as possible. If a school has a high ratio of instructional staff to students, it is shaded dark in the students to IS column right there in the middle. If a school has a high level of students to staff, it's shaded lighter. So another way of saying that is the level of shading equates to the density of instructional staff to student. More adults, more instructional adults per student. If it's darker, fewer. If it's lighter. Okay. Just picking apart these numbers a little bit, we can see that we have 3 schools which fall within the tolerance. Ripton, Salisbury, and Weybridge. And then we have 2 schools which fall below, meaning that if a school falls below the student to instructional staff ratio, then another way of saying that is there are more than 15% more instructional staff to students at that school. So it's a richer environment in terms of the ratio at Bridport and Shoreham. And then we have 2 schools which fall above the acceptable variance threshold, meaning they're missing or they have fewer instructional staff to students, and that's at Cornwall and Mary Hogan. Any questions on that?
Matt, just to confirm, the instructional staff has paras at 50%, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Jamie, sorry, and then Laura.
Thank you, Matt. This is my second time seeing this because I had a meeting over the summer with Wendy and Matt and Courtney to talk about this policy. And Matt, these are different looking slides, but if I'm remembering that conversation correctly, the target number at the top right there, can you talk a little bit about that? Because like at the meeting we had, you played around with the target. You were like, you know, the target I thought originally was some sort of either mandate, legal standard, or it was a goal or an aspiration, as the word target suggests. In this case, it's just the average. And so it doesn't say, to me it originally suggested it's what we hope is ideal or something, but here that's not that. So can you say a little bit about what, then everything falls from that target. So if you set the target differently, like what happens?
Sure. So just to back up a second, I think that over the last time we looked at this, excuse me, the variable that we were playing with was not necessarily the target, it was the variance, and there was some question over how that 15% number was created. I think the answer that I came up with is that this is the neutral baseline, that methodology that ACSD has set for itself. So there's no statutory requirement to stay at a 15% window. You can close the window, you can expand it. We can say as a district, we want everybody to be 25% within, range of the median, or 10% or whatever it is. The one that is a hard number is on the previous slide here. Comparability is the rule says 10%, and so that one is a federal rule. So yeah, during that meeting we played around with the variance window to see what it would do to moving schools either within the window, above or below. I think ultimately the slide that you're looking at reflects the precedent of the methodology in ACSD, and for the sake of supplements of plant, this is what we would show to federal government to say, here's how we determine our baseline. Here's how we determine what we allocate before we add title funds to show, hey, if we're adding a title-funded personnel resource to Shoreham or to Bridport, well, they're already the 2 highest saturated ratios of instructional staff to students within our district, and so there's no way that the application of those title funds can supplant anything. Those are all supplemental resources. Where we run into a hard time in this model is at Mary Hogan, where we're saying right now on paper we are not within our acceptable variance window, and in order to show that we are not supplanting using title dollars, we need to be able to show that we are putting general fund assets into that school so that the title funded resources stack on top. And that's one of the takeaways from the data here.
Now, Matt, we've gotten a variance from the Agency of Ed in order to not have to make changes based on the sizes of our schools and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that we're out of compliance in anything based on the differences in the sizes of schools. This is really more for the board's information in terms of a way in which we already have to consider questions like, you know, are we providing equivalent resources instructionally across schools?
So Laura, you had your hand up.
Yeah, my
and then
question.
Mary
Well, I
Heather.
think Steve had his up
No,
before
you
mine.
were
Oh,
before me.
okay.
My question was, where did the 15% come from? So I think we covered that.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to clarify, again, this is just based on enrollment, so this does not factor in student need or
Correct.
anything like that.
Correct, just basic
So that's a
enrollment.
layer that's
On top of
on
it.
top of this. So I guess my question is, when we're looking at the student to instructional staff ratios, obviously what exists in our buildings is based on need to some degree. So how does that, you know, I guess I'm not articulating this well, but, you know, we may be looking at ratios that are a result of extra staffing because of extra need, that then when you compare them to the other schools, make it seem unfair or unbalanced, I guess would be a better. So I guess, how do you factor that when you are kind of looking at resource distribution? You're looking at this as one barometer. Or do you just kind of know, oh, okay, well, the reason it's that way is because there's greater need here. So I'm just wondering how need enters when, and maybe it's too early of a question, and that's okay too.
Yeah, need enters later for sure. You know, I mean, because remember, need is related to specialized services that need to be provided, and you know, and so on and so forth. So that's, it doesn't take into account your guidance counselors, nurses, you know, all of those pieces. So there's some of that need that's in the quality standards. This is really specific to instructional staff as it's defined by the federal government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this really sets the floor. You know, it's a baseline neutral methodology, and then on top of that, we would add the need-based pieces of the puzzle.
Thank you.
Steve?
The next slide is similar, so
We
I'm
have
going
a
to move
couple
on
more.
so that we can.
Sorry, Matt. Just
Okay.
2 more questions. Steve?
Sure.
So you used the 15%, and you've explained why you did that. I just wanted to point out that if you use the 10% that the federal government uses, that all of the rural schools except Cornwall and Weybridge fall into the low category, with Weybridge squeaking by at 7.2 instead of 7.18. So in fact, if we use the federal government calculations, it looks different.
Well, the federal government only sets a threshold for comparability. They don't set one for neutral methodology. So that's I just want to point out that the 2 different fiscal tests, it's not the same test.
Okay, Ellen?
Yeah, my question is like more for Wendy, but if we, I know the policy committee is looking at this idea of moving students around, but if we start concentrating kids with higher level of needs in programs like that little one built in Ripton, will that drastically mess this up? Because we might need to double the amount of staff there if we had.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah,
No,
this is kind of what I was
because
trying to
there
get
are
at.
no student services staff are in this calculation. This is strictly classroom teachers, building administrator, and general ed paras. So classroom paras at 50%. So any of the programs that we have, any parts of the district that relate to a therapeutic approach to kids, you know, in terms of student services would be exempt from this.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
Matt.
so the next slide is in the same vein, but instead of instructional staff, we're just looking at classroom teachers. So that's the only staff demographic that's represented here. Instead of instructional staff, we're just looking at teachers. Otherwise, everything in the methodology is exactly the same. One of the new pieces of information on this slide comes from the Champlain Valley Superintendents group. I don't know if they're formally an association, but I think so.
They are.
Where there's a benchmark that's sort of been set by them of 17 students to teacher. And then you can see here at ACSD, our median is 13.4 students per classroom teacher. Using the 15% rule, we create a variance window of 15.4 to 11.4 and use that with the same shading and text color rules to show the ratios there in the students to classroom teacher column. And again, you can see that there's a range of different densities, and that we have only Mary Hogan outside of the class size window created by our average, but that it does still fall within the or under the target student to teacher ratio as set by the CVSA.
And again, it's not that any of these class sizes are too big or too small. That's not the point. It's really how are they in relationship to each other. That's what this is focused on.
I'm going to open it up to questions there. Seeing none.
Do you want me to introduce your next segment, Matt? Are you ready to move on
Should
to
I
that?
segue myself?
Let me help you with a little bit of segue while you
All right,
load up your
you
next
segue and I'll
presentation.
find the
Yeah.
attachment here.
We will tag team moving this forward.
Thank you.
So again, we'll come back to some of these things, as we talk about equity-based budgeting and some of the things that you'll want to see as we develop the FY26 budget as a whole. But tonight also just begins, what we're going to call, budget driver session 1, because there are a number of different pieces that are going to go into this budget season. And so we've broken it up into session 1, which really kind of focuses on some of the external pieces that are being considered statewide. And these are, I've asked Matt to put current in just about everywhere because these are under discussion. The commission is coming out with recommendations in December for cost-cutting measures that the legislature will take up in January. I mean, this is very much a moving target. In other years, you might have been able to say, well, we'll have, the yield that looks like this, and we'll have the seal that looks like this. And I think the advice everywhere is that is not necessarily what we're living in right now. So tonight we'll just be just revisiting some of those statewide budget drivers predominantly, and Matt will give you a heads up as to what those calculations might be looking at. And then the next time we meet, we'll be talking about student services budget drivers. So we're just kind of trying to break it up a little bit to build understanding as we go. That's all I got, Matt. Are you ready?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
And now for the doom and gloom, right? This is always the presentation to kick off budget season and sort of make remarks about the landscape, what's going on, and what we're paying attention to as we head into the season. And so it doesn't always paint the rosiest picture of things, or at least it hasn't in the last couple of years, but it is, it's a list of all the important pieces of the puzzle as they start to come together and what we know and what we don't know. The presentation is 2 major sections. The first part is external drivers, so what's going on outside of our control or outside of our district. The broadest one of those is probably the Vermont political landscape. as anybody who went through the budget process last year knows, the state government is in a state of turmoil, especially around how they're going to fund education. And so there's a little bit of tug of war or conflict between fiscal conservatism at the executive level and the governor's stated intent to make education funding reform and cost containment a cornerstone of his campaign, in an effort to try to lower property tax bills across the state. TBD on if the ed fund is actually the bad guy that he says it is, but again, that's what's coming out of the State House from the governor. And then at the legislative level, we have lawmakers whose argument is that cost containment has been impossible because as costs have gone up within the ed fund has also been asked to do more in terms of providing new services that the fund was never asked to pay for before, whether that's universal meals, aging facilities, mental health services stemming from the pandemic, private school tuitions to schools who serve students who are on the school choice model. There's a lot of different things where money is leaving the ed fund and not going into educating kids in the same way that it used to, without any major increases in the relative size of that fund within the state's budget. It's up 2% over the last 10 years relative to the rest of the state's pie. What does this do for our budget development? So first and foremost, it makes planning hard because we don't know what's going to happen. And so it's hard to make a long-term plan or a 1 year out plan when you don't really know what's going to happen. But it does speak to a strategy to build a budget that's adaptable and can be made to adjust if the rules change in the middle of the development process. We don't have anything today that says they're going to do that, but we didn't last year either, and they did. So on top of that, we're also working with a new set of laws as passed by Act 183 last year, the yield bill. We have untested systems, and we have state administrators, including the Secretary of Education, who are doing it for the first time. So there's a lot of uncharted territory and new ground. We also have the newly formed Committee on the Future of Public Education, which is doing its work now and will release its major report in mid-December, focusing on cost containment, merging educational quality, and cost optimization. So we're looking forward to figuring out what the committee has to say in December, which could be one of those surprises that forces us to change tack in the middle of the process. The next external driver is the excess spending threshold. So this is another new element. And what the excess spending threshold is asking is, how does our education spending per equalized weighted pupil compare to the state average? That's the whole point of this. So we're going to do a quick refresher on pupil weighting. This Pac-Man looking thing is a pupil. And there's 3 of them. So if we just count how many pupils we have enrollment. And for the sake of equalized weighted pupils, enrollment is averaged over 3 years. Okay. The next thing we do is we figure out which grade level each pupil is at. So we have small, medium, and large. And depending on their grade level, they carry more weight. So instead of the count being 3, by factoring in grade level, we might now have 6 weighted pupils. The next thing we do is we figure out what kind of demographics apply to those pupils in their grade levels. Poverty, sparsity, density, all of those things. English language learners all carry different weights. Depending on the demographic makeup of our pupils and their grade level, we get a final weight. And when that's combined with our average enrollment, we get something called LTWADM, which really needs to be a better acronym, but it is what it is. We're stuck with it. So that is, whenever I say equalized pupils, what I mean is LTWADM, in case I slip up. So, excess spending threshold is coming back.
Steve, do you have a
under
question?
183.
Well, I was just gonna talk about that. The reason they're not gonna change LTW ADM is because that is a temporary placeholder. So a real term will come soon. Hopefully we'll only have to deal with this for another year, but yeah, don't worry about the mouthful staying there.
This needs a better brand name, you know?
Yeah.
All right, so under 183, the excess spending threshold is going to be, or currently expected, to be 118% of the statewide average district per pupil ed spending for FY25, plus an inflation factor. So the next slide's going to break down a little bit, but what this is telling us is where we're at right now on our per pupil spending in FY25. If we were to take that and carry it over to FY26, 0% increase, so no increase to the budget, we are at the spending threshold. We're not above it and we're not below it, we're right at it. So any significant budget increase will likely incur the double taxation penalty. What does that mean? So 118% of the inflation-adjusted Vermont state average. So what we do is we see the Vermont state average there on the top. That is the average ed spending per LTWADM. So after all the federal grants and other things get taken away, this is just what is the ed fund pushing towards each one of the district's LTWADMs, and then what's the average statewide. The next thing we do is we put an inflation factor in. Right now it's estimated at 3.2%. Again, this is something outside of our control. It's a measure of the economy. We don't know exactly where it's going to land, but that's the guess. That gets us an inflation-adjusted average of 13,666. Then we take 118% of that to get 16,126. Right now in FY25, we're at $16,099 from the ed fund per LTWADM. That tells us that we are at 118%. So I think if you were to put a couple of decimal points in there, it might be 117.9 something percent, but ostensibly it's 118. That gives us 0% growth potential above that threshold. The way it works is anything that we spend above $16,126, so let's say we spend $500 per pupil more than that, that gets added on to the per pupil spending a second time. So it's our per pupil spending would be $16,626 plus 500, because the 500 is all of the dollars above that threshold. So you get taxed twice on everything above the marker. That's what double taxation means. Okay. The next driver is healthcare costs, and these are, you're going to hear about healthcare costs every year. Everyone's seen what's going on in the news with Blue Cross and MVP and the Green Mountain Care Board. It's worth noting that we use VSBIT as our healthcare provider, and so we're not tied to any of those news stories about 25% or more for some of the private and small group plans, but we are expecting an increase. And so what we know, or what we expect now, is that the increase is going to exceed current budget constraints. What current budget constraints means is that we currently have about a 5% surplus within our FY25 healthcare budget. A lot of this is variance that's based on individual plan selection. So family plan costs more than a couples plan or a two-person plan. So some of those individual decisions are reflected in that difference. but it does give us a little bit of wiggle room to absorb a rate increase with a projection of $800,000 to $1 million, $800,000 to $1 million of new spending on healthcare. That could net out to between $500,000 and $700,000 to the budget, just based on healthcare.
I have a
The next-
question. Sorry, Matt.
Okay,
I have
yes,
a question about
yep.
that. So, what I'm hearing is that we haven't spent all the money that we budgeted for healthcare for fiscal year 25.
Well, we're in FY25, so this is just a really early marker of where people's plan selections have come in. We haven't seen, this is an encumbrance. It's not really anything more than a guess at where we
Right.
might land,
Right.
but there's not a lot of certainty in that number yet.
Okay.
Which
It's
could be
hard to,
different
at
next year.
quarter one, know what
Exactly.
where
I mean,
we're
we
going to end
don't,
up.
we don't know what people are going to select.
I will
so.
say that float between the 5.0 and 5.3 is similar to what we've seen in previous years as a
Okay.
margin there.
I'll wait till later on this.
If anyone remembers the tax rate discount plan that came in the middle of the year last year, middle of the winter, this was the renovation to the what's the first thing, the cap or whatever. It's meant to step down every year. So the discount we received in FY25 was proportionate to how affected we were by the new weighting system. We were negatively affected by 13%, so we got a 13-cent discount in FY25. It's going to go down, the discount is going to go down by 20% this year, so from 13 cents to 10 cents. Less discount means the same thing costs more. So if we take the budget and we move it from one year to the next at 0%, it's going to make the tax rate go up without any increase in spending. So disadvantage led to the discount. Discount lasts 5 years and steps down by 20% each year. You can see that we're going to be at a 10-cent discount here. That would equate to a 3-cent increase to the district tax rate at level funding, just because of the shrinking discount. The next external driver is the state's CLA adjustment. And this has the most slides and is the smallest change, but we're going to go through it tonight because it's going to be a good opportunity to walk through this this change that they've made under Act 183. The state has done something that's a little bit of a mathematical contortion in order to make the EDTR, the Equalized District Tax Rate, look bigger than it ever has before by comparing it to the state average. So what they're doing is they're trying to make the tax rate that we show in budget presentations look more like what people are actually going to see on their tax bill to prevent that sticker shock, so that you're not saying, oh, I see that the equalized district tax rate for ACSD is $1.49. How come when I got my tax bill it said $1.95 or $2, because of CLA? So it's not going to fundamentally change the rates, it's just going to change how they look. The EDTR is going to look higher off out of the gates than it has before, and that's going to probably wind up on the warning when the budget goes out for a vote. The reason that this is a driver is that it has the ability to affect sticker shock at the ballot and not at the tax bill. And so if we are not able to cleanly and concisely convey this information to voters during the budget development process, we could wind up with something that hinders the ability for this budget to be passed. Again, doesn't actually affect the tax rate. It just affects how it looks. A quick refresher on yield. I liked this. This was from a state presentation. If you think of the yield as a unit of measurement, every time a district spends 1 yield per weighted pupil, it adds $1 to the tax rate. So 1 yield equals $1 of tax rate. This is a really straightforward way of thinking about what a yield is. Our tax rate was about $1.50 and fell about 1.5 yields. So whatever the yield gets set at in December when the letter comes out, it's by statute supposed to be December 1st. We can bank on that being about 1.5 of those, and that will give us sort of an estimate of what our tax rate is. That's the yield. Now, CLA. So our district spending per weighted pupil is divided by the property yield. Spending per weighted pupil divided by property yield, which determines the EDTR, Equalized District Tax Rate. This is the rate that a district would have if all properties were assessed at fair market value. So if all of our towns had just been reassessed and everybody's property, everybody's assessed value matched what the market rate was for those homes, we would have CLAs of 1.0 across the board. Of course, towns are all lagging on their assessments, and it's hard to stay current. And what happens, or what has happened, is that the value of homes outpaces the assessments, because homes are increasing in value faster than they're being assessed. The CLA comes in and adjusts that to say, all right, well, the homes are worth more now, but the assessment hasn't happened yet, so we're going to use a CLA to artificially raise the tax rate for that town. And so that's why they're there, and they're calculated for each town each year. Meaning, if you have a town where market pricing leads to a low CLA, which leads to high taxes one year, that average home price might level off, and the CLA might wind up coming back up. It's really independent on a town-by-town basis based on what happens in real estate that year and the last 2 years. So in some of our towns where 10 to 20 real estate transactions might be the whole story for 1 year, you're not necessarily looking at a huge data set to determine what that average is, and that gives us the potential for some big swings in some of our smaller towns. The average of all towns CLA is this new state CLA adjustment factor. This is the mechanism that the state is using to manifest that change that they were talking about, where they're going to make the EDTR look bigger. And so you can see in the box there, if the statewide adjustment were made to ACSD's FY25 numbers, our district tax rate would increase to $1.99. Remember, it started at $1.50 or $1.49. And just by adding this state CLA factor, this adjustment factor, it jumps up. Now what it's saying is, does your town's CLA happen to be above the state average or below the state average? If it's above the state average, then your tax rate goes down because your, again, CLA is an inverse thing. If your CLA is below the state average, meaning your homes are outpacing the state average in their market price, the tax rate goes up. But this is what it's going to set as the district tax rate, and what will most likely be by law required to put on the warning. Here it is in graphic form. So the previous town tax rate calculation is per pupil spending divided by yield equals the tax rate. Tax rate divided by CLA equals the town tax rate. This year, this is what it looked. Oh, sorry. In FY25, we added the discount, which brought that EDTR down. The discount that I talked about earlier will step down each year. In FY26, this is what it looks like. So you can see that statewide adjustment is plugged into the formula, same formula, but in 3 different cases. So it makes has the effect of making that tax rate look bigger as sort of like a pre-adjustment, and then the measure of how close a town is to the average is sort of the post-adjustment, a smaller post-adjustment, arriving at the exact same town tax rate as if it were the previous calculation. But again, putting the onus on the school district to sell the budget at a higher tax rate than we have ever had to before. That's it for external drivers. I'll pause here for a sip of water and any questions on the slides so far.
Yeah, just an observation, if we thought it was hard to explain it last year, it's like...
Yeah, we're going to talk about it early and often.
Yeah, really hard.
It just factors the CLA in up front, as opposed to waiting for the CLA in the back end, you know, so from that standpoint, you know, it's okay, but I mean, the whole thing to me just calls into question the use of property tax as an educational funding driver, as opposed to something else. Because we've now, this formula has so many hypothetical situations that it feels like it's difficult to nail down in any way that seems understandable.
Yep. Steve, go ahead.
I was looking at it and I see a lot of calculations talking about the money and the spending. This assumes not just that we are level funded, but that our enrollment is level. Because if we lose enrollment again, that there's changing the numerator and there's changing the denominator. And
yeah, that's a good point.
We're potentially, I mean, being right at that 118 if we're just talking about spending, and we have no declines in enrollment, we have already crossed that line if we lose any more students.
It's also a concern because, you know, this district is, as I've gotten to know it, we have no unfunded mandates. We are doing everything that the Vermont legislature expects of us, to the letter. Whether it's proficiency-based graduation requirements or flexible pathways or whatever it is that we've been asked to do by the state, and you know that these mandates are many, this district has implemented fully. There are many districts across the state that have not done that. So one concern that the superintendents have is that in looking at the differences in per pupil spending across the state, we're comparing districts who have made some of these investments as required by law and other districts that have not been able to do that because they've not been able to pass budgets that have allowed for those mandates to come into play. And I think, you know, those are some of the underpinning elements here that are, you know, are maybe not as close to the surface as they might be.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one because all of the districts in the state got factored into that state average, which is used for the excess spending threshold. So again, you have parts of the data set used for the threshold where districts are out of compliance with mandatory state staffing, and programmatic things, and they are artificially bringing the average down, and the average is going to force, you know, higher spending districts who are in compliance with all of those things to
be penalized,
to reconsider,
figure out a way to bring all those mandated requirements forward in the next budget. So it's really a hard thing there.
Suzanne.
So Matt, also included in here are all districts that have a bond, correct? So that's also figured in here? Because we, as a state, I mean, just because South Burlington or Burlington does a bond, doesn't mean that just they pay for it, we all pay for it.
Currently,
yeah, I think that bonds, for the sake of, and I don't want to mess this up, so don't quote me, but the bonds prior to July 1 of 2024, I believe, were excluded from this for that reason. Sort of a grandfathering in of pre-existing bonds so that they're not part of it. Moving forward, any new bonds will be part of the per pupil spending in a way that is very hard to understand how the state can want to promote schools to deal with their deferred maintenance across the $7 billion of statewide need, and say that there's going to be this like punitive law that says any bonds wind up in the per pupil funding in a way that totally shuts down any kind of school by school construction. So that's a head scratcher. I haven't seen anything come of that yet, but we're keeping an eye on it.
I didn't want to be Debbie Downer, but I knew that was in there somewhere.
Yep.
Thanks,
All right, so
Now you can proceed to the happy part of the presentation now.
the happy part is when it's over. So the ACSD drivers focus more on things that are a little bit more internal, and elements that we have some measure of control over. The strategic plan implementation is really just a measure of our own landscape. Right? On the first slide, we said, what is the state's landscape? What's going on at the State House? What's going on with the legislature? What's this tug of war look like? What's the direction that they're going to take? How much uncertainty is there? We're having a parallel conversation at the board and district administration level as we determine how the strategic plan is getting implemented and what the future looks like for the next year. So we're in a transitional period, and we talked about this during the FY25 budget, where we were saying, all right, we're going to hold the line because we have this new strategic plan and we have a new superintendent, and we're going to get to the moment where we change in FY26, and we have arrived there. So we're going to start talking about what those changes look like in a dynamic setting. Planning is complicated because uncertainty makes the future look foggy in the crystal ball. But as the strategic plan implementation begins in a constrained environment, right? If those external drivers told us anything, it's that we have some real guardrails up around expanding this budget. That change, which we're projecting is going to happen, is going to manifest as internal shifts, right? If you can't go up, you're going to have to rearrange. And I think that it has yet to be determined how that's going to play out, but I guess what I'm predicting is that the potential for those internal shifts is going to be a budget driver, something that has a reshaping effect of our spending plan this year, because we know that we want to be dynamic with our spending, we want to work in pursuit of our goals, and that we have to do that by coloring within the same lines that we have already set in place. We know about wage increases from our union, and well, less than the non-union side, but for the two negotiated agreements. We know that our licensed, and again, I think that we are past the level of approval needed to show these numbers, but for our licensed staff, teachers, and other professionals are receiving a 5% increase in base compensation plus step advancement, which factors out to about 7.34. And unlicensed, 6% plus step plus that VEMR's benefit, which factors to about 11.7. Those dollars are in the boxes to the right. 1.15 million, which is about 436 per pupil. That's equalized pupil. And the same for the 378,000 for the unlicensed. In non-union, wage growth tends to fall in line with what's happening in the licensed and unlicensed sectors. So I think that this estimate is based off of administration receiving 5% and other non-union staff receiving 6%. That totals to $737 per pupil. So there's this new money coming in and needing to figure out where we are going to put it. It's going to be a budget driver. And that's it for internal drivers, major drivers. I did throw a few other ones in here which are always in need of consideration. We have our tuition rates. This is the rates that we pay for universal pre-K to other providers, and to the Career Center for high school students to attend, and the rate that we charge and bring in as revenue for our tuition students to attend ACSD, and for some of the other programs that we run here. Insurance that's not related to healthcare is another driver. General liability and workers' comp tend to tick up a little bit. I wouldn't call those a major driver, but something that we need to factor in. Transportation always goes up, and it's set to do another 4.5% this year, so that'll be a small uptick. And then repair and maintenance cost containment. This is always just making sure that as we work towards some of the larger elements of our facilities plan, some of those, state level, bond level, major projects, can we contain the repair and maintenance costs on an annual basis, and sort of mitigate anything from becoming a major driver. That's it for the extras. And as Dr. Baker said in the beginning, as we move into some of the individual cost centers, especially student services, we will have more granular detail on what's going on there. Those stack on top of all these as factors that we need to figure out how we're going to build into the FY26 budget. Any questions?
Questions for Matt?
Good job, Matt.
Yeah. It's tough. Yeah, I think, listening to this, we really need to have even though I know it's a moving ball, the information, right? But we really have to be thinking hard about how we're going to engage with the community and try to explain this. I know, it's just really going to be hard, but with that adjustment to by including that CLA average onto the rate, it's going to be really hard for people to understand what they're looking at and what they're voting on. So,
and it's going to be the same for every district, so it's not going to, again, we'll be in
and we know how that goes, right? Look how many budgets went down, right?
Yeah.
And it's scary.
It is.
It's really driving us into the mediocrity. That's what the state is basically doing by utilizing, especially, the most important thing I thought was that utilizing those districts that are not meeting standards, all right, and thus have lower cost per pupil, or whatever we call them, and being in that whole ratio distorts this tremendously, I think.
Totally.
I think that's just such an inequity, especially for districts like us.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of districts like us, and
Yeah.
they're not all bad.
Yeah.
The ones at the lower end, they just haven't been supported like we
Right.
have. But in the past, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, Mary Heather?
It certainly is discouraging, and just from this simple story that's been laid out, it almost feels like we're being set up to not pass our budget, right?
Right.
There's so many factors that are complicating it and making the sticker shock so tremendous that it's hard to imagine convincing our voters that they need to come along and continue to support us like they've been supporting us in the past.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just wondering how this informs kind of the number that we're aiming for.
Yeah.
Because it just seems like even just to carry forward what we've got right now is making it that we'll be double taxed. We won't be able to pass this budget. So I'm just already starting to think about like how we've got some pretty serious guardrails. How do we
navigate?
Yeah, and I think we need to be really, really cognizant of, where where we are, where we can tighten the belt. Because we're gonna have to. I think we're gonna have to.
Well, it defines what is tightening the belt.
Right.
We've always tightened the belt as best we
Right.
could. It's not like we overspend.
Right.
But it's, you're right, I mean, it's,
Yep. Well,
okay.
thank you,
Oh,
Matt.
thanks, Matt.
Great, great
I
Monday
can see why you weren't
evening
here.
I don't know why you did it from Washington.
We'll do the whole budget season.
Yes.
Remote
We're looking forward
presentations.
to that.
But
Yeah.
seriously, thank you, Matt. You're doing
Thank
a
you.
good job
Thank
You are a genius on this.
keeping us
You are, I mean,
And you explained it well.
understanding, what's happening.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you all the best of luck in figuring it out.
That sounds like you're planning on not coming back.
Thank you, Matt. Enjoy your dinner.
Yes.
See you, Matt.
Bye,
Oh,
Matt.
at 9:30? Pull me in.
Yep, okay. So, getting back to the agenda, we already took care of, the potential action that we needed to, and we got that off the books. The next is report of the chair, and I have to say, I really screwed up. Because when I sent the, email on Tuesday, and Mary Heather pointed this out, that my brain was just fried at that point, and, you know, I was thinking it just had the wrong name on the file, but it really truly was, I picked up an agenda as opposed to picking up the superintendent evaluation that came out of, you know, that the executive committee had reviewed. And I apologize tremendously. And then I did a double screw up because I thought I had already sent it out. It wasn't on my mind when I was working with Darcy to make sure that materials were in board packs, so you at least would have gotten it there. And so, sorry guys. So, I will get that sent out correctly this evening and double check it to make sure that it is, because your input is really important on this. In the meantime, I had sent it out to principal building leaders as well as Wendy's leadership team, and I did send the right one to them, so I only screwed up with the first one I sent out. So with that said, we'll put this on the agenda again next week. And, next week, no, I'm gonna be away, it's not gonna happen. We'll put this on the agenda when, we set the agenda next week. And, for the next board meeting, so, again, please accept my apology. So next, on the agenda is report of the board, and we can walk through these items. First of all, communication and engagement. Tricia, do you have anything you wanna?
Yeah, sure. I will say that we had hoped to put forward the procedure for A21 before you guys. I don't know if you remember, we talked about at the very end of last school year. It didn't make it onto the agenda or board pack, so it's going to have to wait till next meeting. But it's hopefully to officially set our procedure, especially for public comment and things such as that. So that will be coming up. In the meantime, it is time to put together our fall board update letter. So I've reached out to the heads of all the committees and asked for, that's okay. That's okay. This is your friendly reminder. I need it by next Monday. We're meeting on Tuesday to actually put the letter together. So we should have it again for our next meeting for you all to see and give feedback if necessary. And I think that's it for reporting out today. Anything else, fellow committee members, that we want to stress? It's been a long meeting already. Do we want to bring up the thing we're thinking about putting on the website for feedback? Part of our meeting, so we are having that
extra meeting this month, both to put together the letter and talking about creating a web form for which the public can reach out to the entire board. Right now, there's no super easy way for the public to do that. They have to look up each of our emails individually and enter them in, and it's a pain in the butt. And as has been brought up during today's meeting a couple of times, we need to make it easier for the public to get in touch with us and to know what avenues they should be accessing to do that. So we are going to be discussing ways to put together a web page, a web form in order to make that easier.
Thank you.
The one other thing that we did discuss as a group was the the rotating meetings thing, and
yeah, I don't know where. I don't know exactly where we stand on that as a board. It seems to have been tabled for somewhat future discussion. But from what it sounds like is that doing traveling meetings is not going to be feasible due to various recording requirements. And so we as a committee are discussing alternate ways for us to go out and engage. So it is more at this point stressing for the rest of the board that ideally we'll be coming up with a list of opportunities, and the expectation is that board members will participate in at least one, if not more, opportunities throughout the year, since we aren't going to be able to do the regular built-in outreach. Just emphasizing that we need to make that commitment as a board that we will be reaching out to get the feedback and information that we really want to get.
Okay. Mary Heather?
yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't,
You're fine.
I'm not sure that we had clarity about what the board had decided, so it was kind of
We
like.
put it back in the board. I'd have to go back and
Yeah.
look at the minutes specifically. So I'm doing this.
I think what I remember is that it was gonna come to the C&E committee to discuss, to come up with other options, and we're working on that. I
Yep.
think it's still kind of up to the board to decide whether you wanna do rotating and make it happen, or do these other options, but I think from the committee's perspective, it's either or. We need to reach out to our communities and be in our communities, so.
Folks' thoughts, Jamie?
Didn't we vote on this?
We had
We
a
sent it
straw
back.
poll.
We straw polled.
We straw polled and it was pretty evenly split. So we left it that
Was
we
it
were,
a even split? Like, what do you mean pretty even?
it was like 7-6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And there's a cost associated with the rotating.
Right.
Right. And so my recollection is we had left it that Barb and Dr. Baker were going to reach out to MCTV and explore what
Actually,
those sorts of.
You were going
I was gonna say.
Well,
Yeah.
so yes and no, because I said I was going to, or, I took that on, and then later in the meeting, you said, well, but we'd be happy to do that. So I understand both, and I did talk to Kurt, and Kurt did send something on to you guys. So I don't know where that stands right now. But on top of all of that, from my surface conversation with MCTV, there are still the
cost.
same issues. There's
Right.
still the same cost issues.
Right.
There's
There's costs
there's
as well.
no magic wand there.
So
So-
they have the same technical.
Yes.
Yes.
They have the same
hurdles.
technical
There's
issues
no
that we do.
magic here, you
Yep.
know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that route would involve extra costs in order to make traveling meetings feasible for us to meet all the requirements that are now expected of us.
Yeah. So I think it's the end of September at this point in time, right? And I'll throw something out for us to consider, that this year, we don't, because of the costs involved, we don't make the attempt to try to get to every school, because we're running out of runway anyway. But I think we do need to have some meaningful dialogue at the town level, at the school, or even the community level. You know, I think one of the things that Dr. Baker's presentation and report out with Ripton showed is how important it is to really engage, you know, at the school level, but also at the parent level, but also even at the community level. And that could be, you know, even meeting with planning commissions, understanding what they're firming up their plans in Middlebury for the new development, that kind of thing. You know, to really actually gather data that's going to be useful for us in projecting impacts on enrollment. You know, it's all still a crystal ball, right? But the more informed the crystal ball is, the better. And so I think if we could really start to focus maybe at that level, right? Getting into the, you know, the towns, that would be a good thing. What do others think? And you really try to have meaningful dialogue. Yeah.
Whatever that means, I think it's better than falsely going and having our meeting at a town
where no one shows
where
up.
no one shows up, okay, and where there is no dialogue. People can make a public comment on Zoom, okay, if they wish to, in whatever format. So I think, as I've always stated, and I've been clear on this, I think it's stupid to go out as we have, but I'm all in favor of designing something. I don't know what that is, because we're reaching such a small percentage of the population no matter what we do, which is a budget issue too. How do we sell? But I think it would be great to work out something that we could all be a part in without sort of falsely thinking, just because we're there, that we're doing something beneficial for either side, us or the community.
I know some of districts, surrounding districts have even had, you know, coffee hour with constituents in each town. So, you know, it's a time for people know that you're gonna be there, is one example as well. You know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, you know, we could have, we had those porch forums in the past, right? Where we go to listen in a community and engage as well. So those are just things that, you know, come to mind. So possibly the board may want to consider directing the Communication Engagement Committee to really look at it, you know, to ensure that whatever we're doing has some real meaningful data that we're gathering. And
That
then
we're gathering and they're gathering
and they're
from
gathering
us.
as well.
Right.
Exactly. So we actually have a dialogue, which we can't do here, right? So I would be happy, you know, to participate as much as I needed to help ensure that to happen. And, you know, to go, you know, to our towns, whatever, or even regionally, right? If it's not every single town, but, yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Anyway, so if it's okay, go ahead.
The only thing I was gonna suggest is each board member knows their town. And so even if we looked at like our community calendar, like my select board meets the same nights that we do. So it'd be really hard unless I don't come here to meet with the selectmen. But finding out when like the planning board meets or the zoning board meets, I'm more than willing to take on a few meetings like that.
Yeah.
But if we all were to help out the community engagement by saying, oh, in Bridgeport, these are the local meetings, these are the nights.
Yeah.
So then we can give them stuff and take on what we can.
Yep. Good idea.
Can there be a point to attending those meetings though too? Like what are we asking for, what are we bringing? Because they all
Yeah.
have agendas and work to do also, so just recognizing that us just sitting in and saying, hi, I'm on the school board won't be that meaningful. But if there's something to ask of those commissions and something to offer,
Right.
then it's.
Right. And for example, it could be, give us an update on, your planning, your development, and how you anticipate that changing your demographics, your population potentially over the next few years. Could be one ask. I think Steve, I'm sorry.
Yes, I
hoping to
was waiting.
contribute. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It wasn't your fault.
Okay, go ahead.
So I want to emphasize and bring up the point again that the meeting of the school board is to conduct school board business. And if we start cutting into that time to do community outreach, that's why I strongly support the going to separate, like what we did at Shoreham today, but with people in the building. That seems like a much more effective way to do community outreach because you can talk to people then. Because the board meeting is a really kind of a very stilted and artificial environment. It doesn't make us talk to people. In fact, the model is set up so that we don't have a dialogue with people. And if we are going to have a dialogue with people, I think there's got to be a better format to do that. By moving us around the district, if we do it like we used to do it, we're adding to our board agenda. Because when we have these student presentations when we're there, which eats into our time, and when you talk about who shows up for those meetings, the parents of the students that are giving the presentation, and then after the student presentation is over, most of the public leaves. So are we really doing community outreach when we do that? So those are just some observations that I've had over the years about, does having it in the separate towns really increase our community engagement? Because I think there's better ways to do it.
Well, and I'm curious, I wasn't able to make it to Shoreham because my work day goes until right before this. Do you feel like that was effective for outreach? I mean, my thought of that is really it was information for the board rather than.
Pure board. But we did leave a really nice postcard. So we did, all the students are gonna see that the board was there.
And recited.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With pictures by members. who
Of the
did
board.
Very good
Wonderful
artists.
I love it.
You should have seen the
I'm
rainbows
so sorry I
and
wasn't
butterflies.
there.
You would have been proud.
Anyway.
Anyway,
Sounds like
so
my
we
sort of
digress.
thing.
Yeah, so I think, we can move on, but I think that's what I think the replacement needs to move to, is having the communication and engagements, come up with some ideas, but send them ideas too. Suzanne's, send them what meetings are, that kind of thing. I think that was awesome. Okay.
But also, I really take Ellen's point of having some clearly defined goals
definitely.
and thoughts.
Yeah, definitely.
On everyone's mind is their tax bill, right?
Yes.
So.
That alone, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm very happy to attend town planning, meetings with board members. If there is interest on the part of town municipal groups to just talk about what's happening, at the state level, why tax bills are the way they are, what are the different changes, what if that's an avenue to be able to address some of those things. I mean, usually town taxes and school taxes go together, right? So if they're wanting to have some sense of kind of what we're talking about, and that's better presented in a town forum in that way, I'm happy to go and give some sort of an abbreviated set of comments around that if it's helpful. Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys. Next is Jason, is the Facilities Committee.
The Facilities Committee met on the 18th. Two things I'll bring to your attention are the update from Bruce that's in board pack. Just talks about improvements that were made over the summer at various schools and projects that were completed. If you have any questions about that, just shoot me a note. The other thing we discussed that's relevant is that we've decided to move forward with the capital improvement planning process and hire an outside firm. So we're going to start that process, RFP process and selection process and all that, and we'll keep you. This was something the board will have to execute when it comes time, but getting that ball rolling now.
Thank you, Jason. Finance Committee.
We haven't met, we're meeting on the 7th. We'll discuss at that point not only the beginning of the budgeting process, but also the fourth quarter end, which we haven't discussed yet. And then the first quarter will be done by then, but that's usually a fairly quick discussion because it doesn't reflect on a lot. So that's what will be happening. We didn't feel it was worth meeting just on that before the 7th.
Okay. Thank you, Chip. And I assume you don't have, do you have anything else for
No,
negotiation? I
no,
shouldn't
we've
put
already
words
got-
in your mouth.
I got it.
Sorry about that.
Nothing additional to what we already discussed.
Okay, awesome. Policy Committee?
We have 4 policies here that we had proposed, we would like to see the board to adopt. You've seen these policies all once before, or sometimes more. A5 hasn't changed basically at all. A30 would replace a current A4, which is about the process by which we adopt school board policies. E20 is probably the most interesting one, which is about the community use of school facilities. We had a question at our last meeting from Mary Slozar about that policy, and the question was about, well, will your amended version of E20 restrict things like CPAC or friends of groups or whatever from being in the school? Pietro's answer was no. That seemed pretty good, so we kept the policy as is. And the F1 policy is the same, about trauma reimbursement. So we'd like to take a vote on adopting these policies. Can we do it all at once, or do we have to do it one by one?
You can do them all.
We can do
I
them
think
all
we can do them
together.
all.
Do a motion.
Yep.
It's all in
Okay.
one motion.
So I'll make a motion that the board adopts policy A5, A30, E20, and F1 as worded and included in the report back.
I'll second. Okay. Any discussion?
Thank you for all the hard work you put into this.
We're meeting tomorrow too.
Yeah. Okay, all those in favor of approving policy A5, A30, E20, and F1, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, Jamie, the policies and policy committee. Those policies have been approved. Next, Addison Central CPAC update, and Joanna and Suzanne.
Yeah,
I was running the
CPAC.
VSBA meeting, so I wasn't there, but I believe Joanna went.
They met on September 5th. It was a pretty important discussion about the role of CPAC and how it could be seen as a resource to the district, and sort of embracing that a little bit more. We were joined by Nicole Carter and Tracy Harrington as administrators. And to note, there is going to be an annual meeting scheduled in October, and then a CPAC event on Thursday, November 14th from 5 to 9-ish in the MUHS library and gym.
Just to know, it was rescheduled to the 12th.
Oh.
Sorry, you don't know
I
that.
don't know that.
Because the library, they're gonna have the musical here on the 14th, so
Okay.
we save the date.
Okay, any questions? Next, Middlebury Community TV update. One thing I just wanted to mention is that Kurt will be reaching out to Matt if he hasn't already done so. They get a large portion of their funding from Comcast, and that funding is going down. So there may be a requirement that as a district, that we may need to, pay or contribute for some of the services that we provide, that we are provided. So more will come of that. So I did in fact, reach out to Kurt and suggest that he needs to sit down with Matt. And, he's also willing to come and give a presentation so that we know exactly what they're doing today within the district, because it's more than Jim being here recording for us. There's several programs.
And not just a school district, probably other municipal.
Yeah, and Middlebury already does do a contribution, is my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right?
the town does.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, and so this may be, something that'll be required of us as well for the services that we provide.
They provide.
They
provide.
Thank you, I'm tired. Okay, Parks and Rec, oh no, I
Career
skipped,
Center.
Career Center, sorry.
The open house is going to be on October 3rd, 4:30 to
I missed
6:30. That would be a Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
You should definitely go. They're great events and they give you lots of snacks. It's wonderful. Their next meeting is this Thursday. Steve?
In the interest of brevity and time, we're not going to ask all the pointed questions that we were requested to ask. But I did want to point out that because of the drop add period, that enrollment from Middlebury actually dropped nearly 50 students. So 50 more students dropped than added, and that's a pretty significant number. Many of the students, not all of them, did blame the new schedule at the high school to say that that was why. So we thought we'd coordinated that well, but with boots on the ground now, it's not working out well. And how that relates to the budget discussion is if there's fewer people over there, the tuition rate is higher.
There's, I know that there's a meeting with the principals from all 3 high schools, I think on Friday, and, so there's conversation about those things, certainly moving forward, so we'll see where they land.
But all 3 of the sending schools, 2 had a drop. We were the worst, and they.
Well, we're also the largest.
Yeah, we're also.
Yeah.
Right. But when we take away 50 students, that really hits them. So.
Okay. Next, Parks and Rec.
I don't have anything to report.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda is our second public comment period, and is there anyone
left standing?
Yes, is anyone left standing? Either on Zoom or in the room. Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I felt compelled to just stick around and
Thank you.
tell all of you thank you for your deliberations. I know this board spent a lot of time talking about Ripton the past 2 meetings, and it's, very apparent that there's a lot of irons that you guys all have in the fire. So I just wanted to say thank you for the thoughtful deliberations, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for sticking around, Steve.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, Mary.
Hi, Mary Slozar. I don't have my timer. I found it very interesting to listen to Matt's beginning of the budget season discussion, and I just wanted to flag a couple things that rose for me that I really hope that the board or individual board members might consider as you start down this big, long, challenging process. One is that I feel like we're in a really unique situation with strategic plan implementation and a new superintendent to approach budgeting a little bit differently. This will be my 3rd season observing the board's deliberations. And typically we start with, this is our default budget and how are we gonna tweak it? Rather than, what do we think our kids need? And what's the best way to budget to meet our kids' needs? And then adjust. And I just really hope that people can think creatively from that standpoint. I think most of the people I know, not everyone, but concerns about whether or not to vote for a school budget is not so much about the tax rate, but like what's actually in here. I'm not interested in funding something that I don't believe was really thought through. The other things are around, it was the whole thing around the Title I, the supplementing versus supplanting was such an interesting conversation. And I'm really curious how that applies to special education funding. So that's a clear situation with Title I funding. But we also get funds that are very specifically meant to be towards special education, and it's never been clear to me how that is acting in our budget, particularly in this concept of supplementing versus supplanting. And I would really hope that some of you would try to ask important questions around that. wonder why. I wonder if, I know there's a reason, it's the federal approach to count paras as 50%, but I think that's something that could be debatable, given that we don't have to follow that standard, and it seems like it would be a worthwhile conversation to think, is that how we want to set our neutral methodology for thinking about equity? And what, I'm curious what that neutral methodology might look like, not the same one, but what would be a neutral methodology for thinking about need and how funds are distributed across schools based on need. It seems like a really tricky one that I'll be watching and listening and trying to learn with you on. Finally, I think the issue around it being a really challenging season, budget season, is a real one. And I hope, I know there has been discussion about you all doing more advocacy kind of work, and I would just like, why, you know, get in the paper. Talk to John Flowers about what these issues are and see if you can get community members to also tell Montpelier that we're not okay with this. So please speak up. I'll support you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone on Zoom? Okay, so next is our board reflection, and Jason has agreed to give us a little synopsis.
Well, I just prepared a couple pages of things. I'd like I just want to say that I'll just reflect over not just this meeting, but our last 3 weeks of meetings, and I think we've asked a lot of each other, and I think we've done really well, and I'm proud of the discussions we've had and the work we've done and the way we've handled difficult conversations. And I just want to let you all know that I appreciate you all, and that's all I got at 10:03.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So can I have a motion to
adjourn?
To adjourn. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Nice trip, Barb.
Oh, thank
Sail
you.
well.
Oh, thank you.